Most iconic Pokemon in the whole series, rivaling the popularity of even Pikachu. In both the origin and main series animes, Charizard is seen as the ace of Red and Charizard is one of the most iconic Pokemon in the whole series, rivaling the popularity of even Pikachu. In both the origin and main series animes, Charizard is seen as the ace of Red and Ash's teams. Until Greninja showed up, but we don't talk about that. But in competitive play, where Pokemon teams are optimized for victory, did Charizard actually suck as bad as competitive players say? Let's find out. Welcome to Competitive Pokemon History, where we go over a Pokemon's journey through the metagame over the years. This video will briefly cover any notable Charizard information in both singles and doubles throughout the generations, including both Smogon and VGC formats. In addition to this, only significant changes in Charizard will be covered, as this video would be too long otherwise. Alright, let's get started. Beginning in Gen 1 from 1996 to 1998, tournaments for the first generation of Pokemon games were held during an event known as Nintendo Cup. In this tournament, players were allowed to make teams of 6 Pokemon, but battles would be conducted in 3v3 singles matches, with players choosing from their pool of 6 whose total levels did not exceed 155. Many websites online indicate that the optimal set for Charizard back then was the Sword Dancing set, which consisted of Sword Dance, Earthquake or Rock Slide, Slash or Hyper Beam, and Fire Blast. Unfortunately, Charizard had 2 banes of its existence in the meta, the first one being Moltres outclassing it in raw power, and the second one being Starmie, who could one-shot Charizard whenever he began to set up. Even though Charizard had access to Sword Dance and a decent base 100 speed stat, he could still be vaporized by faster Pokemon like Starmie and Jolteon on the turn he used to set up Sword Dance. Charizard had a decent damage output, but was ultimately underutilized because he was checked by very common Pokemon. 2 years later in Gen 2, Charizard got a break in the meta with the introduction of the move Belly Drum. This move, combined with Charizard's diverse move pool, gave Charizard an edge over Moltres because not only did he have a higher damage output after Belly Drum, but he could also hit more Pokemon for super effective damage thanks to access to Rock Slide and Earthquake. During this time, Charizard was B tier because after a Belly Drum, he could one-shot anything besides bulky water types. He could also one-shot Snorlax with a Hyper Beam after a Belly Drum, who was SSS tier at the time. However, he never got higher than B tier because of Pokemon like Starmie, who could still outspeed him even after a Belly Drum. In addition to this, Belly Drum also sacrifices half of the user's maximum HP in exchange for a ×4 physical attack increase. This means Charizard could still faint from one Starmie Sir. This also means Charizard was only useful very late game, when faster Pokemon and bulky water types were gone. Charizard was essentially the cleanup crew during a battle. Moving on to Generation 4, Charizard became more effective as an all-out special attacker. But with the introduction of Stealth Rocks, Charizard and many other Pokemon unfortunately went from underused to never used in modern competitive single formats, such as Smogon. This is because Charizard is a fire flying type, 2 types that are both weak to rock. Upon entry, Charizard loses 50% of his health when Stealth Rocks are up, making Belly Drum useless, since Belly Drum also sacrifices 50% of its maximum health. This also means after just 2 switches while Stealth Rocks are up, Charizard faints by switching in, having lost all of its health. It should be noted that Charizard in singles could also utilize Dragon Dance, however there are way better options during this time. But that's okay because in Gen 6, Charizard finally reached top tier status in both Smogon singles and VGC doubles formats, with the introduction of its Mega forms. In Smogon singles, both Mega Charizard X and Y were very big threats due to the massive damage output both could accomplish. Mega Charizard X became one of the best Dragon Dance users in the format, being able to OHKO pretty much anything in the tier after just 1 Dragon Dance. This is because not only does Charizard X have a massive attack base stat upon Mega Evolving, but it also has the Tough Claws ability, giving contact moves like Flare Blitz an extra 33% increase in damage. In Gen 6 VGC up until VGC 2016, Charizard Y shined in particular because of his access to a stab sun boosted Heat Wave. Heat Wave in doubles hits both of your opponents simultaneously, and thanks to Charizard's massive special attack stat, not a lot of Pokemon, even the top tier ones, could survive a Heat Wave. And just like in singles, Charizard Y could vaporize water type Pokemon with access to Solar Beam, being able to threaten common VGC Pokemon such as Tyranitar and Rotom, so long as he can set up the Drought safely. But both Mega Charizards are not without their weaknesses. Both keep Charizard's base 100 speed stat, which means it could still be outsped by a number of the other top tier threats in both formats. Though counter defensive options depend on the Mega, both Mega forms can be walled by a few set of bulky Pokemon. Finally, both Mega forms, especially Charizard Y, do not like being hit by rocks. In singles in particular, Stealth Rock was still a problem for Charizard because it still loses 50% of its health before it Mega Evolves. However, despite these setbacks, the absurdly high damage output from both Mega Evolutions made Charizard one of the best competitive Pokemon in the metagame. It only took 6 generations, but it's cool to see Charizard is finally as powerful in the games as he's depicted in the anime. So did Charizard actually suck? Well, he did get bought by Stealth Rocks for 2 generations, but the other 4 he was decent, and one of those he was even top tier. So I'm gonna say, nah, not really. He was pretty decent for at least 4 of the 6 generations. And hopefully he'll be good in the 7th generation too. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this little overview of Charizard and competitive Pokemon. I also hope you thought it was interesting how a Pokemon can change so drastically between generations of competitive battling. If you liked the video, be sure to give a like and subscribe to my channel because I plan Venusaur is, what can I say about Venusaur? Mascot of Pokemon Green in Japan. That one starter that everyone remembers because he's Gen 1, but they still prefer Charizard and Blastoise because dragons and cannons are just cooler than plants, I guess. He was number 15th on IGN's top 100 Pokemon list. By comparison, Charizard and Blastoise were number 1 and 2. Okay, you know, forget about all that. That doesn't matter. Popularity aside, Venusaur was still a great Pokemon, or was it? Let's find out. Looking at Venusaur's stats, like Charizard and Blastoise, it's pretty well-rounded in most categories, not too powerful or not too weak in any one stat. In fact, in Gen 1, it could hit a lot of the top threats with Razor Leaf, such as Starmie, Slowbro, and Tauros. Razor Leaf was a preferred grass move over something like Solar Beam because it had a high critical hit ratio and it didn't take 2 turns to charge. And for those of you that don't know, anything in Gen 1 that says high critical hit ratio basically means critical hit all the time because critical hits were based off of speed in Gen 1. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Persian. Razor Leaf combined with Sword Dance boosted body slams and Sleep Powder made Venusaur a pretty sizable threat in the metagame. However, the first known early competitive format in Gen 1 was Nintendo Cup. If you guys want to know the Nintendo Cup rules, I explained it in my Charizard video, but basically, during this metagame, the move Blizzard was used a lot. Blizzard had an accuracy of 90 back in Gen 1, and was later changed to 70 Gen 2 and onwards. Because of this, Pokemon that could utilize Blizzard to the fullest, mainly being Jynx, Lapras, and Articuno, were very popular at this time. Venusaur being a grass type made it extremely weak to these Pokemon. Venusaur could also get walled pretty easily by Zapdos and Exeggutor. Speaking of Exeggutor, Venusaur was always in contention with Exeggutor for who was the better Sleep Powder user. However, Exeggutor has higher special as well as being a Psychic type, and well, we all know about Psychic types in Gen 1, right? So Venusaur had mild usage for its damage output, but unfortunately was threatened by common top tier threats, kind of like another starter we did earlier. Alright, Gen 2, this is where things get a little bit more interesting for Venusaur. Though the most used sets don't seem like a big change, take note that Leech Seed was buffed in Gen 2. It no longer stacks with Toxic like in Gen 1. However, on its own, it drains an 1/8 of the opponent's HP rather than just a 16th. Unfortunately, our good friend Exeggutor stole Venusaur's limelight yet again. Exeggutor just dealt a lot more damage than Venusaur. However, at least in this gen, Venusaur had a lot of usage as an alternative Sleep Powder user to Exeggutor. This is because Venusaur had a better matchup against Cloyster and Machamp, which were both popular Pokemon during this time, having the ability to put them to sleep first because of its speed. In addition to this, Venusaur could actually fight Starmie in a Stall War as it was immune to Toxic, a move commonly used by other Stall Balls and especially used by Starmie. Unfortunately, due to its lack of damage, it could also lose to popular threats such as Marowak, Suicune, and Tyranitar, because these Pokemon could actually outdamage it a lot harder with super effective moves such as Fire Blast on T-Tar. So in this gen, Venusaur did a lot better, but it was still overshadowed by Exeggutor yet again. Now in Gen 3, this is where things get a little bit more complicated because EVs replaced static speed and natures were introduced, meaning that Pokemon could no longer have all stats maxed out. Though this did increase the depth in competitive Pokemon, some Pokemon were better at adapting to these rules than others. Also, there does not seem to be a record of Nintendo Cup format in Gen 3, or at least I couldn't find one. So we'll go with the 6-on-6 Mogan Logan OU format that was happening at this time. We will also not be covering Gen 3 doubles because VGC did not exist yet, and the only known tournament series was a tournament series known as Journey Across America. And you can see footage of that here, but we can see a lot of uber legendaries, so I doubt Venusaur was worth taking up a slot over these Pokemon. Anyway, with Smoking Singles, our friend Venusaur, while still being a viable Pokemon, was still outclassed and walled by the top tier threats in OU depending on which set was used, because Venusaur could either be a wall, a physical attacker, or a special attacker. Although it could wall out threats such as Raichu and Swampert and take out threats such as Skarmory as a special attacker, common top threats such as Celebi, Blissey, Gyarados, Salamence, and Metagross were all immune to most of Venusaur's attacks or could KO it with ease with super effective attacks. Celebi should be noted here especially because Celebi was a top tier threat that was immune to Leafy and could begin setting up in Venusaur's face with substitutes and Calm Mind before blasting it with a Psychic. One would have to take out all of these top threats depending on what set you had before Venusaur could have a shot at the rest of the team. Alright, moving on to Gen 4. Venusaur, though placed in the underused tier, became most commonly used as a bulky sweeper and as an alternative to Roserade, Shaman, and Celebi. In this generation, it finally got the power it lacked in the previous gens, with moves such as Grass Knot and Leaf Storm. In addition to this, its entry hazards were a lot more popular in this gen due to the rise of Stealth Rock and Toxic Spikes. Like Roserade, Venusaur could absorb Toxic Spikes upon switch in and begin setting up to sweep. However, the other grass sweepers mentioned before outclass it in speed and powers, so it really depends on what type of team it's on to make it work, but that goes for every Pokemon. Anyway, it's countered by Celebi again, and depending on the set, is checked by Zapdos, Skarmory, Dragonite, Infernape, and Heatran. In VGC, Venusaur was not seen in high-level play due to being weak to most of the top-tier threats, such as Cresselia and Metagross. Alright, moving on to Gen 5. Venusaur got a nice boost in competitive play with the addition of its hidden ability Chlorophyll, making it a great addition to Sun teams and singles. Chlorophyll gives Venusaur double speed while the sun is up. Because of this, Venusaur in the Smogon format was almost certainly comboed with Ninetales on the team. And thanks to the sun, the move growth gave Venusaur a +2 boost in both attack and special attack, making it a deadly sweeper and wall breaker. In Gen 5 VGC, Pokemon such as Heatran could benefit from the sun and wall Venusaur to no end. In addition to this, flying types such as Tornadus and Togekiss also pose huge threats to Venusaur in VGC due to their massive super effective damage and resistance to most of its moves. Now finally, we move to Gen 6. Venusaur's usage certainly increased in both Smogon Singles and VGC. In singles, thanks to the introduction of Mega Venusaur, Venusaur's bulk and special attack increased, making it a very popular tank, as well as part of several Gen 6 cores for singles. Not only did its bulk increase, its Mega form gave it the ability Thick Fat, which eliminated fire and ice as a super effective weakness. It's a good thing Pokemon like Talonflame were commonplace because trying to outsustain Mega Venusaur is a nightmare. Moving on to VGC, Mega Venusaur was also a popular pick in VGC as a bulky Leaf Seeder. A bold Mega Venusaur was even able to take a Brave Bird from Talonflame or a Psychic from Mega Gardevoir, and was able to wall opponents late game with Leaf Seed. Alright, and that was Gen 6. So overall, how did Venusaur do? I would say it's the most consistent first gen starter. Although it didn't become top tier in singles and doubles until Gen 5 and 6, it looked like it was on the cusp of being top tier for Gens 1 through 4, and was definitely a niche pick if you needed its very specific but effective tools. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like these. I figured out a way to pump out these faster, and the next one won't take so long to make, I promise. Also, leave a comment on which Pokemon I should do next. Though having done 2 of the first gen starters, I think you know which Pokemon's gonna come next. But for the video after that, I want to know what Pokemon you want to see. So don't forget to leave that comment, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya!